I have regional affairs analyst Mark Bichachi, but before I engage them, let me bring in our lead reporter Sophia Onuna, who has more insights on this South Sudan story. Sophia, good evening. I know it's been a very busy day in Khartoum with very scanty information coming out of the Sudan capital, but I'm sure Kenya is also keen on this development. What more do you have for us?
Good evening, Yusuf. Yes, news that they may have been a deal struck by those two leaders, President Kiir and rebel leader Machar, is welcome. There's excitement around that. However, it's yet to be officially confirmed. South Sudan, the youngest country in the world, seceding from the Sudan in 2011, has been in civil war for the last 6 years, if you like. At least 100,000 people dead from this conflict, Yusuf, and hundreds of thousands others displaced because of the ongoing fights, the disagreements between these leaders, the mistrust that has continued to reign and see even agreements reached before fall apart. Remember, in 2015, there was that peace deal. However, soon after, allegations and counter-allegations of parties not sticking to the end of the bargain. And even last year, 2017, we saw another ceasefire, but still, that did not hold. So as much as there is some excitement that this could be it, again, it's that what they called very cautious optimism, Yusuf. And as far as if indeed there's a deal in place, will it hold this time around? What is it that needs to happen to ensure the same does indeed take place? Most importantly, for the sake of the people of South Sudan, the UN referring to this as one of those worst humanitarian crisis that has been witnessed in the world in the recent past. But to talk a little bit more and get insights on just what has been transpiring this evening, the Chief Administrative Secretary, Foreign Affairs Kenya, Babu Namwamba, joins me. Thank you, sir, for making time for us. This report's coming from Khartoum that perhaps there's a deal. What do you know about that?
First of all, let me say that if there would be a deal, I would be really excited. I would be very happy for the people of South Sudan, the long-suffering people of South Sudan. And of course, you know that Kenya has been an integral part of this whole process of the journey to peace and stability in South Sudan. Kenya was right at the heart of the journey toward the comprehensive peace agreement, which was signed here, and the watch of the Kenyan leadership. President Moi, President Mwai Kibaki have all been part of this. And now His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta is right at the center of pursuing this. You'll remember that at one time he even flew to Juba at the height of the crisis in 2016 to try and really arrest the situation. And so Kenya would celebrate a deal that would bring this to an end. You'll remember that when South Sudan became independent in 2011, that independence was celebrated as much in Nairobi as it was in Juba, and so I would be very happy.
Yeah. Can you confirm if there's a deal or not? Do you know?
I would treat the information filtering through with caution. From my sources, I know that the chief protagonists in this very difficult situation have at least made the significant gesture of meeting face to face, and they had a conversation in Addis. Now they are locked in another conversation going on in Khartoum. Reports filtering through do indicate that we could be hearing some substantive update tomorrow.
Right.
And so I would advise that we hold on until we formally receive the result of the conversation that has been going on in Khartoum tomorrow.
Okay.
I have been in contact with a couple of people that are close to the process, and they have advised that tomorrow would be a good day. Tomorrow would be a good day to expect some information from that. But the good thing, and what I would say in the interest of the people of South Sudan, is that at at least there is a conversation going on,
Yes,
and that is a face-to-face. That is a good gesture. I have been involved in this process very, very intimately on behalf, of course, of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, on behalf of the government of Kenya. And I can tell you that one of the biggest challenges has been the trust deficit. There has been a huge trust deficit between the protagonists. And therefore, getting them to start talking and build confidence and rebuild trust, which is part of this phase now, is significant, very significant.
So you've talked about it would be exciting news if, in fact, this deal was confirmed, a permanent ceasefire. But it's not the first time, as I mentioned. There was one in 2015. It broke down. We heard other talks going on. He fled the country. That's Machar has been in South Africa. So why would you say excitement? Because trust also is not earned overnight.
Of course, we know that it is very easy to start a war. It's very easy to start a war, but making peace is not easy. It's not easy to make peace, and it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of rebuilding trust after trust has been breached. It's not easy, and of course there have been a lot of missteps. There have been a lot of hiccups. There have been a lot of disappointments, and even a lot of frustrations. I talked to a lot of people from South Sudan. Yesterday, I hosted a group of South Sudanese youth who came to see me and shared with me a memorandum that has already been transmitted to the key leaders in this process, just to know the sentiments of the young people of South Sudan and what they wish to see this process come to. And I can assure you that there's a lot of frustration, and there is a very strong desire to see this all come to an end. South Sudan is a beautiful country. South Sudan is a great people. But what I can tell you is that that frustration, that determination gives me hope that any deal we find now can hold. And remember, there is also a lot of strong international community push. That push is regional in terms of those of us who are neighbors to South Sudan, within IGAD, within the East African community, both of which South Sudan is a member, within the African Union, again of which the South Sudan is a member, and it escalates all the way to the United Nations. Okay. So there is a very, very strong push. And at the end of the day, really, we have been careful through what we've been calling the High-Level Revitalization Forum, the HLRF. We've been careful to ensure that whatever deal is struck must be of such a content and of such a substance that it can hold. So you don't want some temporary ceasefire, some cursory glance, or something which really does not constitute getting to the root cause of the problem and finding lasting solutions to what ails this country.
Let me ask you this. Would you agree with the assertion that selfish ambition by the key protagonists, the two leaders, Kiir and Machar, and the grandstanding that has been witnessed over the years is really at the heart of why we are not getting peace in South Sudan?
The challenge in South Sudan cannot be reduced merely to the responsibility of two people. Of course, the personality challenges, what you may want to call maybe the absence of chemistry. Sometimes chemistry between two people or between leaders can be useful. But this is not just about two people. There are challenges that are historical. Deep-seated historical issues. There are challenges that are institutional, going to the very structure of government. There are challenges that are even constitutional. And that is why among the steps, among the measures that are part of this whole journey is that once a ceasefire is agreed, and an interim government is put in place, the most important project to be undertaken by that interim government will be a new constitutional dispensation, under which then you can have a comprehensive democratic election. Okay. And so it is a deep-seated challenge, which I wouldn't blame on one, two, or a few people.
All right, finally, in hindsight now, was it a mistake for South Sudan to secede? Looking at all these numerous challenges, would it have been better to stay in there and figure the issues that were there before? Because it appears the youngest nation in the world still continues to be in ICU.
Sophie, absolutely not. Independence, liberty, liberation is a beautiful thing. Kenya as a country that fought for our liberty and that have enjoyed our liberty, and we know what it means to be liberated, what it means to be free, is something that I wouldn't blame and I wouldn't want to take away from any people. I think the people of South Sudan were entitled to self-determination, and the challenges they are facing are challenges which are surmountable. We can find a solution to these challenges. Several African countries have walked this journey. We have seen similar challenges in places like Liberia, places like even Nigeria, Ghana, Somalia, closer home, Uganda, next door neighbor. But these challenges should not take away the right of the people of South Sudan to self-determination. It is just that it drives the point home that we need to be careful with our independence. We need to be careful with the liberty. When we get independence, we need to cherish it. And when we get our nationhood, when we get our statehood, we need to cherish that and we need to protect it jealously. And that is what the people of South Sudan really have to do, especially the leadership.
All right. Many thanks for your time. Chief Administrative Secretary, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ababu Namwamba, optimistic that a deal would mean a better future for the people of South Sudan. Yusuf.
Thank you very much, Sophia, for that. Of course, we'll be waiting to see details of that agreement tomorrow because we're getting reports that Khartoum is going to make that agreement public tomorrow morning. Many thanks, Sophia, for that. Let's now take a quick look at the items that may have been agreed in the peace deal between South Sudan President Salva Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar in Khartoum today. We're going to get those infographics shortly for you there on your screen. There you go. That is part of the agreement today. And according to the signed framework agreement, the two leaders reached compromises on a number of outstanding issues, among them permanent ceasefire, cantonments for all forces, deployment of forces by IGAD, the African Union, to safeguard the ceasefire there. And then 3 capital cities, namely Juba, Wau, and Malakal on temporary basis to host the 3 proposed vice presidents. And then Khartoum government to secure the oil fields in South Sudan in coordination with the Juba administration. And then they rehabilitate the wells to restore the previous levels of production and declare to work together again for a third time. Now, before we look at the chronology of events, actually, let me take you straight there. On June 21st, 2018, that is just a few days ago, there was talks in Addis Ababa, which collapsed. President Salva Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar met face-to-face in Addis for the first time since 2016. The IGAD-led talks convened by Ethiopian Prime Minister Dr. Abiy Ahmed were also attended by presidents of Djibouti, Kenya, Sudan, South Sudan itself, and Uganda was represented by Minister of Foreign Affairs. But after the meeting, representatives of Kiir and Machar poured cold water on hopes for an end to a 5-year civil war. While South Sudan's government was open to having the opposition in the vice president's role, they will not accept having Machar return to the position held. Fighting erupted in July 2016. Now over to March 2017, 2018 very quickly, and IGAD decided to release South Sudan's exiled rebel leader Riek Machar from house arrest in South Africa as soon as possible on condition he renounces violence there. Machar, who has been held in South Africa since late 2016, should, quote-unquote, then be allowed to relocate to any country outside the region and not neighboring South Sudan. And then over to February 12, 2018, and Machar's spokesman sentenced to death. And he was sentenced to death on charges of treason and incitement against the government. That is James Gadet Dak. Over to May 22, 2017, and President Kiir declared unilateral ceasefire, promised to release political prisoners, and warned that his troops will defend themselves if attacked. And then fast forward to December 2016, Riek Machar was yet again under house arrest in South Africa, and his movements were restricted and his phone calls monitored and controlled. Now, over to April 26, 2016, Machar was sworn in as the vice president, as first vice president in a new unity government. However, in July, he was fired by President Salva Kiir and fled to DR Congo amid violence. The broken peace agreement saw hundreds of civilians killed and thousands displaced. Of course, fast forward to 2018 and fresh talks, second round of talks have begun in Khartoum. There's some hope, there's some light at the end of the tunnel that the two factions, actually we're told there are more factions in South Sudan, are perhaps going to ink an agreement that is going to bring an end to the violence there in the youngest nation in Africa. In studio, once again, I have Mark Bichachi, who's the regional affairs analyst. We have Peter Biorajak, who's joining me via Skype all the way from London, United Kingdom. And then John Penn, who's a delegate on the ongoing talks in Khartoum, who's also a representative of the South Sudan Civil Society, who's joining me all the way from Kampala, Uganda. Good evening, gentlemen, and welcome to the program.
Good evening.
So let me begin with Mark,
right
here in Nairobi. And Mark, you've seen the development there, some of the scanty information coming out of Khartoum. Are you optimistic that this round of talks are going to bring sanity back to South Sudan?
The optimism I have based on the scanty information that we have is the recognition that they need to have three centers of power. That, to me, alludes to the fact that there is possibly an economic part of the deal. There's possibly also a military and security part of the deal, because one of the biggest problems has been that each of the leaders has had their own factions of the army, both militia and standing. And therefore, for me, what the hope is that in dividing this country into three capital cities, it is a recognition of having three centers of military power and three centers of economic power, and then forcing them to talk, even though independently, but to talk towards a common direction while still recognizing the importance of these regional blocks. That is the hope that I have. But based on the history of how many times they have failed in ceasefires in other deals, then I agree with Sophia Anuna when she says that my optimism has to be quite cautious, because the reality of the matter is the matters in South Sudan are quite complex. We are talking about the leadership perspective. We've not talked about the need to heal the nation, the need to address the poverty and the damage that has been caused because of the war. So there are many issues that they need to discuss. So our optimism has to be quite cautious.
Peter, are you also cautiously optimistic like Mark? And do you believe like the second round of talks in Khartoum might bring sanity back to South Sudan?
Absolutely not. I think the whole idea of going to Khartoum in the first place was misplaced. And if you look at the information that is coming out there, indeed, I doubt if these are actually peace talks. They are more of an insult to the dignity and the integrity of South Sudanese people. You have Sudan proposing to divide South Sudan into three sort of confederate states, dividing the country along regional and ethnic line. You have Khartoum again proposing to come into our country and to secure our oil fields. This is completely unbelievable. And I doubt if Salva Kiir or Leader Machar signed something of that sort, if they would be able to sell it to their supporters. So I'm not optimistic. I don't think Khartoum is being realistic. And in fact, if you look at the agreement that is being proposed in Khartoum, it goes to the heart of the matter. And that is the regional interest that is basically affecting South Sudan. Each of our neighbors is trying to use South Sudan to extract resources and political capital for their own use. And what you see going on in Khartoum, essentially Khartoum trying to find a way to come back into our country and to control our oil fields. We fought for 21 years, sacrificed 2.5 million lives for South Sudan to become independent from Khartoum. And for our leaders to be sitting in Khartoum to take this as suggestion from Bashir is really an insult to people. I doubt if they really understand.
So Peter, are you saying regional politics is to blame for the current crisis in South Sudan?
No, regional politics is a big part of the problem that is going on in South Sudan.
And this is why I want to bring Mark into this conversation. I'm going to go to John shortly. Mark, do you agree with Peter's point of view there, that regional politics is to blame partly for what is taking place or what is happening in South Sudan?
South Sudan is not only the youngest nation in the region and in the world for that matter, it's also landlocked. So Khartoum does have interest in it. So does Uganda, so does Kenya, so does every country around it. One, because we host a lot of the refugees in our respective countries. Secondly, because you cannot exist as a country without the possibility of trade and interaction with your neighbors. It is incumbent upon every leader in the region. And Babu Namamba has declared even the interest of President Uhuru Kenyatta in settling matters in South Sudan. Let's not pretend about it. It would be a great advantage for Kenya if South Sudan would have peace, because that means greater security in the northern part of Kenya. It means that our oil fields in the northern part of Kenya will also be safe. It provides an avenue for trade. So the reality of the matter is that the regional bloc should participate in these peace talks, and they cannot ignore Khartoum simply because they fought for independence from it. It would be like Kenya saying that because we fought from independence from the British, then in 2007 we should have totally ignored the British ambassador, which is not the case. We live in a global village, and we must be willing to get help where we can get it. Of course, it is still incumbent upon the leaders to protect the resources of the South Sudanese, to protect the interest of the South Sudanese, but not in an isolationist perspective.
Yes, I can see John there shaking his head. John, let me get your point of view on this, because Mark says he's cautiously optimistic. Peter says he is not optimistic with regards to today's deal. What is your point of view?
Yeah, exactly. We want peace by all means, but it doesn't mean we have to fumble around and break the glasses of peace in the room. So what I am seeing here is the people who should be more optimistic there are the regional leaders, because they have their own cake, share of cake. You have seen the peace agreement in Addis Ababa. It is now moved to Khartoum, and they have put in their incentives, and it's going to move to Nairobi, and then they put in their incentives, and it may come to Kampala here, and then Arusha, Kigali. I don't know where it is going next. While our people are waiting, they're waiting for that. Can you imagine a child waiting for milk being passed around the neighbors, and then it comes later on? Our people are tired of the war. But it doesn't mean that they have to throw away the little thing they have at hand, which is the independence. Yeah, we are going to compromise our independence if we are not serious. We are a child in the middle of bullies, of adults, of some boys whom we don't know. We are just growing up yet. So we don't know actually whether our milk will reach us. It is being passed here and there.
Mark, is the region looking at South Sudan as some sort of a piece of cake?
That would be a very strange conclusion, given the fact that countries such as Kenya have hosted South Sudanese refugees at great expense to our own selves for many, many years. Secondly, South Sudan does not exist in an island. It exists in a continent, and the interests of the safety of South Sudan does affect the region. It affects business in the region. It affects the stability in the region. We cannot expect that the stability of South Sudan is independent of Uganda, independent of Kenya, independent of Sudan, as it were, or of Ethiopia. It is the responsibility of the South Sudanese to ensure that the deals they're negotiating not only bring peace, but maintain the integrity of the nation, but they cannot be isolationist in that thing. There's nothing wrong with those debates happening in Nairobi. Nairobi has brokered many, many peace deals across the region. We've had our own negotiations negotiated by foreign powers. The reality of the matter is this: we need to find peace in South Sudan, and that peace is they're not negotiating in any instance the independence of the country. We're giving them suggestions that have worked for Kenya. I'll give an example. Kenya today has county governments, which was a sore issue in 2007. If you remember the 2005 referendum, we totally refused what was known by then Ugatuzi. But today we have county governments as a result of negotiation, as a result of foreign intervention. So the reality of the matter is South Sudan must accept that it is part of the community of nations in East Africa.
But Mark, I think the problem South Sudanese are having with some of the regional countries, that some of these countries have some sort of a hidden agenda.
But you see, the reality of these negotiations is we cannot separate that Kenyans are interested in the safety of South Sudan because it improves the safety of Kenya. Yes, we have an interest. We have an interest in that our neighbors need to be safe. We have an interest in that the Ethiopians want to see a stable South Sudan. A stable South Sudan.
What about Sudan? What about Sudan
in the region?
What about Sudan?
Sudan itself, let's understand, the oil that comes out of South Sudan passes through Sudan itself. You cannot run away from that fact. So is the president of Sudan interested in the safety and the oil in South Sudan? Absolutely yes. But that's what you use to your advantage. If they have the resources to stabilize your country, use that to your advantage. Don't unilaterally kick them out.
Let me engage Peter for now. Now, Peter, reports say that the two rivals have inked an agreement, of course, and part of the agreement is that they've agreed to have a permanent ceasefire. They've agreed the African Union and IGAD forces to come and bring some sort of a sanity back to South Sudan. Don't you think that might offer some sort of hope whatsoever for South Sudan?
No, because there is nothing new in that. How many times? I think the lady that was covering the story from Khartoum made it very clear from the very beginning that there are many ceasefire agreements that have been signed by the two sides since the war broke out. And none of these agreements has ever held. So it should not be that it's now signed in Khartoum and all of a sudden the ceasefire will be respected. That is one. Second, on the issue of African Union and IGAD forces, we have all sorts of forces already in the country. We have the UN forces that is deployed. We have another thing so-called regional protection force already in the country, and we don't see any difference. But that's not the point. What Mark needs to understand here is there is a difference from how Kenya and Ethiopia have engaged with us, and that is totally different from how Khartoum has engaged with our country. Since we became independent, Khartoum policy has been essentially to make South Sudan fail. You remember when South Sudan became independent in January 9, 2011, Bashir said that these people are not going to be able to govern themselves, and immediately he deployed his intelligence services to destabilize South Sudan. Every single rebellion that has taken place in South Sudan has been backed, financed, and armed by Khartoum. So you cannot say Sudan has an interest to see a stable South Sudan. That is not the case. Of course, that is different from how we relate to Kenya. We remember very well how Kenya has treated our people. Kenya has always hosted our people. And we do believe Kenya and its people have genuine concern for people of South Sudan. But that's not the same thing with al-Bashir. You cannot tell me, Mark, that you yourself will allow another government, British government, to come to your country to protect your oil fields and your resources, or to carve up your territory into like a Kikuyu part, a Luo part, and a Kisii part. That is insane. It's basically breaking up the sense of national unity. And that is what Sudan is proposing here. Personally, I'm insulted that our leaders are still sitting in Khartoum. They should leave Khartoum immediately because the suggestion from al-Bashir is an insult to the sacrifices our people have made. There is no way they can be sitting there and take this suggestion of Bashir seriously. How can they take that seriously when 2 million people died for South Sudan to be free? Salva Kiir and Leader Machar must leave Khartoum immediately.
Of course, we do expect another round of talks to take place right here in Nairobi. I'd like to hear John Penn's point of view on this. But before that, let me take a very short break. But when we return, we're going to still talk a lot more about this protracted war that has left more than 4 million displaced and hundreds of other thousands dead in the youngest nation in Africa. We'll be right back. Stay with us.